Welcome to This Time in History, guys. Apologies. This was supposed to be the Ward 15 debate, but I got something better for you. We're going to interview Ward 15 candidate, Miss Sheena Sharp, instead. Welcome to the show, Sheena.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
And I'm joined, as always, by my better half, my partner in crime, my co-host, Ebony.
Hey there.
So, Sheena, Ward 15, Don Valley West.
Yes.
Great ward. I hope you don't mind me saying, when any counselor is there for any length of time, I always say big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit about your story and ultimately what led you to running and why you're running. So go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Well, first off, you're right. Like Ward 15, Drake lives here, right? and we also have we go from the 401 all the way down to the Don Valley. So it's a pretty, I guess it's as big as all the others, but there's a lot of variety in that geography, and not as much like sort of shopping kind of stuff. There's a lot of residential. So I am running in Don Valley West because I live here. I haven't always lived here. I live on the edge. They keep moving the line. I've lived where I live right now for about 30 years. And the other side of me is that I'm an architect. So for almost as long as that or longer, I have been creating housing. So architecture is a team sport. So I worked in a large firm for 16 years. And then I went out on my own in 2003. In 2008, we changed the focus of our firm to focus on low emissions design. So we're particularly interested in low carbon, which essentially means electric buildings. But I realized that me and the other people who I collaborate with, there's no way we're going to do this one building at a time. Like, that's just ridiculous. And I volunteer for a project called Toronto 2030, the 2030 District, which looks at how to decarbonize the downtown. And I realized that this is ridiculous to do it individually. And we like to beat ourselves up, right? But it's a system problem. It has to be solved on the system level. It's kind of like if you vowed to go into a grocery store and only buy stuff with no packaging, like you come out carrying potatoes and tomatoes, right? Like most of the grocery store would be off limits. But if we said, okay, guys, packaging that can't be recycled is illegal, suddenly the whole grocery store is available to you. It's no longer a hardship. It's the way you do it. It's the way that we co-create our future, if you will. So that's why I did it. And I ran for the Green Party in the provincial election. You don't quit your day job when you run for the Green Party. But I enjoy debates. So that's kind of why I said yes, right? And I really wanted to change the conversation, particularly around housing affordability and how we can change that, and particularly around climate action, but also around transportation, which is kind of interwoven with the other two. So I guess that's a really long answer. Maybe I'll let you ask questions about it, both of you.
No, I love it. Climate change is real.
Yes.
And for the people that don't think it's real, they need to get with the program. Ebony and I did a debate. We did a Ward 19 debate. One of the candidates said that the demolition companies that demolish what's left so that the condo builders can build, they don't actually pay any carbon tax or some phrase. They don't pay into the carbon plan. And I was wondering if you were aware of that.
I don't know what they mean.
Well, I guess
What could
because
they possibly mean?
because when you demolish something, all that stuff goes into the air.
No, no, no. And so we have a bunch of problems. Our industry has a bunch of problems. One of them is that when you demolish stuff, it goes into landfill. And I really wish there was a little bit better research. There's not many people who want to stand in a garbage dump and count the bricks coming in, but it's something like 25% of what Toronto sends to the landfill. Now, it is true that the province requires them to have a recycling plan. And it is true that anything like brick or concrete can be crunched up and reused in building roads, or we put stones underneath foundations so that they drain better, so granular, so we can reuse it for that. But part of the issue here also in all of this, in climate change and in housing affordability, the cheapest building project I ever did was converting a hospital into affordable housing. And that's because hospitals are built like tanks, right? They will never go anywhere. And we did it. It was in 2006, and we did it for $75 a square foot. Now, in today's dollars, I don't know what that would be. It would probably be more like 150, but it's cheap, okay? Because if you have all of the foundation and the walls and everything else, yes, you have to, combine rooms into an apartment and put in a real bathroom and all that kind of stuff and line them up. But it's one of the sweet spots. And that's another thing. When you come to Toronto, like, the Riverdale Hospital, the half-round hospital, which was kind of beautiful. They could have built a new hospital and not knocked that down. There was enough room on the site. And so there's all sorts of accusations about why they did knock it down, but we could have turned that into great housing, right? And so these things are so frustrating. These are the kinds of things that frustrate me and that I want to have a bigger part. Even if I don't win, I want to have a bigger part in pushing people to think about these things and make these changes, right?
Absolutely.
And so as the Architectural Conservancy would say, the greenest building is the one that's already here. Because you don't have to make the concrete or the steel and all of the carbon emissions that go with that. Here you go. Your building is here. Put a warm sweater on it. Call it a day.
Yeah,
Ebony,
that argument too, that there's a lot of energy and resources wasted in knocking them down and then building them again. So, and I think that a large part of his carbon emission talk is when you start rebuilding, and all the tar production, all that stuff. Yeah, it's kind of taxing when you could just build on top of something else. And it's a waste of resources, as you mentioned. So it's definitely the greener idea. And I like that. I was really big into architecture. One of the first things I did when I went to University of Toronto was quickly switch from sociology to architecture. I was like, oh, look, walking through, I saw the Oculus on Convocation Hall, and I was like, ooh, this is fancy. We like the way this looks. So I like when things look well, and, aesthetically, but serve a function. And I really like the idea of using urban design to make neighborhoods safer. So I want to hear you go off on that. I'm not even going to put in my own ideas. I'm just excited to hear what you've got planned. If you could just be given a paintbrush.
I think that the urban design part, we have to do this piece by piece. And it's not just about looks, as you say, it's about safety. And so we really, I think, part of our problem is we have gridlock, and we have gridlock for a bunch of reasons. Like, we've got more people with cars, but not only that, we've got bigger cars. Like, if the cars are 10% bigger than they used to be, that's 10% less traffic, right? And then we've also got the hidden thing, which is Amazon. So when we design cities, we design them with loading docks. And it goes from the loading dock to the store. And the idea was people pick stuff up at the store and take it home. Suddenly we got all these delivery vans all over the place, right? So how do we deal with all of this? And I really think that part of the answer will be bike lanes and scooters and that kind of thing. because electric cars, now they may finally get their poop together, but even if we manage to bring them down to a similar price as internal combustion engine cars, that wouldn't really solve our problem. It would just sort of make it a little bit worse. So I really think that we need to give priority to transit, but also, like, transit is inherently slow, particularly if you live far from your job, right? And most of us can't figure out, when there's available apartment, you take it, and it may be 10 kilometers away that you found it, right? But so that is, when you're transferring 3 times or something, I don't think we'll ever make transit fast enough. But I think that if we start to make bikes a bit more accessible, and if you look at all of these, now I'm 61, okay? So I'm sure I would kill myself on an electric scooter, but they look great, right? And you just fold them up and then you go wherever you're going so they don't get stolen. So all of these sorts of things, I mean, I think we have to make room for them, and we have to think about it evidence-based. This is how many people we're moving. This is how far away they're going. And all of this stuff is going to be part of the problem. I mean, one of the main things I think I have to contribute is in housing. Like, you wouldn't believe even the amount of time it takes to get a new housing project approved. And when I served on the Ontario Association of Architects Council, and we did a study just saying how much of that sales price of a condo, and this was 8 years ago, is site plan approval alone, and it was $40,000. And the smaller the project, the more expensive it is, which is why we don't have any small projects, right? Because you need, in order to take the risk and in order to spread the cost around, it's now apparently up to something like about 80K. So if you were buying a condo, 80K of that would go to just this one kind of approval. It's taking like 2 years. So we really need to have, I think of it as a multi-generational opportunity, which kind of means multi-income opportunity, right? And I talk to people like to vilify homeowners, but they're not all like this, but I talk to some people and I say, don't, like, if we can't get housing available in our neighborhood, then your grandchildren are going to live like an hour away. And one guy said, yeah, I know, 3 hours. It's there. People are real people, right? And so we have to reimagine. So why am I going from transportation to this? Because I think we have to reimagine our community with like 5- and 6-story wood frame, which are the cheapest to build, all along Yonge Street, all along Bayview, all along Mount Pleasant, with the higher stuff along the Eglinton Crosstown. And so that we can essentially flood the market and give the big boys a run for their money. I mean, I think that's what we have to do in housing. And if we can do that, that's another way that we kind of bring transportation in, because everything's a moving part, right? So we kind of start to bring transportation down a little bit, because people will have more opportunities to work, to find an apartment that's closer to where they work, or to buy an apartment that's closer to where they work. And the other side of it is that I was talking to one lady who said, I'm not going to vote for you. I'm moving out. Okay, where are you moving to? That apartment over there. You can still vote for me. But she was moving because she was like 80, and she had this house that was huge, right? But she had nowhere to move, and they had just built this place, and off she goes. And that means that we start to unplug. Another problem is that seniors who want to downsize have nowhere to go either. They also need affordable housing. This is what I mean by multi-generational opportunities and kind of respect for each other within the community. And so I think all of those things could help transportation, reimagining our streets so that there's more room for small electric vehicles and bicycles. And so I mean scooters, I mean electric bikes, which are, by the way, fabulous. And also not getting rid of cars, but really taking a look at how many car trips we have on the road, and at the same time trying to get more people living close to where they work.
I just want to jump in. I'd love to hear ideas about housing. You don't have to live under a rock to know that we're living in a housing crisis. We got maybe the highest average number of unhoused people we've ever had. Well, I think. And then we need action, and I'm just wondering what you think that might look like, whether it includes building more low-income housing, whether it includes rent freezes, whether it includes legalization of rooming houses. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
I think probably all of the above. Now, one of the people who didn't show up for this interview is the incumbent, Jay Robinson, who is the only person who voted, she was in the bathroom or something when they voted to start the rezoning process on that Willowdale project, the pre-built housing project. But the funny part is the city needed to ask the province to go around its own zoning to get that done. Like, the city should make its zoning a lot easier. I think there's a distinction to be made between market housing, because market housing depends on people's salaries to be able to cover either the cost of purchasing it or the cost of renting it, right? And so it's not rocket science to know that if a building costs like $300 a square foot, $400 a square foot to build, and the total cost is going to be like $700 or $800 a square foot, then you either make teeny tiny apartments to get down to lower incomes, or you're not serving the lowest income, right? Because most of the transfers are just something like $20,000 a year, maybe slightly less. Like if you were on CPP and the supplements, or if you're not ODSP, it's half that. But if you're student loans or something, I'm probably getting way too nerdy. I'm so sorry. So if we separate these two things, there's some people who are going to require subsidies like rent geared to income, okay, but if we can build more housing so the rent geared to income guys can pick what they can live in, right? That would be really good. I think in the short run, like we've been messing this up for like 30 years. And turning it around I don't know any ideas. There might be people way more brilliant than me who can come and say, oh yeah, all we have to do is this. But I've been looking at housing for many years, and I don't believe that that's there. So clearing the parks, yes, we need the parks, but we need, you don't just like throw people out and damage all their stuff or throw their stuff away and then they have even less, right? You need to provide somewhere where they can go. And if we want to partially admit defeat, find a place where they can put up tents and give them toilets and running water, like communal running water or whatever else, right? And then at the same time, because you need to have people with a place to go. And at the same time, you start to try to ramp up the supply. I was at a conference today. It was virtual, the Residential Contractors Association, and one of the presentations was CMHC, and like lo and behold, they had an exact model of this. They had a model of how far people moved, and they said, okay, if we increase the density, the height in all these single family homes and make them slightly denser, it was like 1.6 meters, and they looked at two different areas, not Ward 15, unfortunately, but they looked at Bloor West Village. They could, just along Bloor, they could get an extra 26,000 in the areas you could walk to the subway, 26,000 units in the next 10 years, right? So that kind of thinking, we have to make it so that this can't be kind of forced on people, and it can't be like eat your peas. It's got to be like we're creating, because I think we can use it. I think I totally missed, Ebony, your urban design, but I think we can totally use it to drive a better urban environment, right? And the other thing, when you talked about it, like one thing, so you know the Yorkdale subway station, right?
Mhm.
Arthur Erickson designed it. And it had this great work of art that when the train came in, this neon artwork followed the train into the station, right? It broke one day, TTC threw it away, done. They had beautiful terrazzo floors with a circular pattern. TTC just seems to like cut random troughs to install God knows what in like we have beautiful, we spend the time and the money as citizens to build things that are pretty cool, and then we just maintain them it's just like the guys who do our sewage treatment plants seem to maintain everything in the city. Like it's just crazy, right? And so that's another thing we have to do. We have to stop using heritage as a weapon, and we have to start having real discussions about what we want to save and how we want that to perform for us. Like, can it be affordable housing? And then we also need to say, how do we celebrate the stuff that we've done well and keep it maintained? And I know I'm talking too much. I'll stop.
No. I'll take this question, Ebony, and then you can ask the next one. We have a $1.6 billion backlog in TCHC funding. And as an architect, I think you said you're architect or architectural?
Architect. No, I'm an architect. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just wondering, like, what's your opinion on the state of some of these buildings? And I know it's not in your ward, but I'm sure you heard of what happened in Swansea Mews in Ward 4. I was just wondering if you could speak briefly to that. And I mean, where are we going to get this $1.6 billion? The province, the federal government, and why hasn't it why has it not happened already? I'm just your thoughts.
I know that there are some smart people running the Toronto community housing. I do think that 1.5 billion is only a small portion of Doug Ford's license fee fiasco, which I think is now sitting at 2.5 billion. We spent something last time I had it all added up for me, including the tracks and the trains and the signaling and the tunneling. Eglinton Crosstown is like 12 billion. So partly we have to take a deep breath and say, this is affordable. We can do this. We're throwing away way more than that at the provincial level. And I do think that we have to look at other ways of, like, I don't know enough, I'm sorry, about exactly how it's financed right now, but I know that there are other countries that do programs like rent to own, for example. So you pay a bit more, but you own it in 20 years. And so some of those kinds of deals that you can make with the tenants, and many of the tenants I know, I've worked for social services, they are never going to be able to do that. They're living on transfers, right? And RGIs. But I do think that the money is there if we want to prioritize it, and housing has to be a first priority. It's like a foundational thing. So, so that's where we get the money. Like, yes, I know we have health, we have education, we have housing. Like, what's with that? And the police budget is 1.1 million. It's 20% of Toronto's budget, right?
Mm-hmm.
So where do we get the money? Well, let's take a look.
And as far as the Swansea Mews, just because you're an architect, I'd love to get your opinion.
I don't know all of the details. I have seen other similar buildings fall apart. Water is the enemy of concrete structures.
Okay.
So it's very, very likely that it was actually a roof failure that nobody paid any attention to because the water never came out. It just went into the walls and slowly caused the connectors to rust. And I don't know that for sure, but I do know that is how concrete buildings tend to, you don't maintain them properly. That's what happens to them.
Ebony, you got a question?
No.
Now you are not really in the parliamentary library, are you?
No,
No, you got me. I'm not.
she's at Hogwarts.
Yeah.
Oh, very good.
No, you're not geeking us out at all. I love it. I like everything you've said so far. Let's see. We were just talking about like housing. Like, so what do you think about abandoned housing, like buildings? Do you think we should reappropriate that into public housing?
Oh, absolutely.
Co-op.
And I think it really depends. Co-ops, we've lost the art of co-ops, and because the big thing about housing is tenure, right? There's two things. There's one thing is can you use it as savings? But the other part of owning a house or a home of some sort is that no one can throw you out, right? You have to do something really wild for them to throw you out, but you won't get thrown out because the rents have gone up and they want to rent it to someone who can pay more or whatever, right? It's yours, like it's yours. So co-ops are the kind of the same thing because nobody owns them, conversely, that the rents, once they've been built and you start to pay down the mortgage, and yes, you pay into a reserve fund, but you tend to get a stable kind of thing with tenure. And so I think that we've got to bring back some of those sorts of structures. And, you know, a friend of mine who is unfortunately since died, but he was, well, it was a while ago, but because David was actually, he bought the first condo in Toronto, which is 40 Homewood, which is, it's like south of Wellesley, east of Yonge. It was affordable housing. And he was a veteran. And as he was coming out of he stayed in the army a little bit longer and he came out in the 60s. And so he was kind of like, didn't have a lot of money, trying to look around. He bought into that building. He bought a bachelor apartment. I think he said he paid $6,000 for it. So this is the 60s. So that was still a lot of money. But after, like when I knew David, it was in the 90s. And so he's elderly. And he said, so we were looking around his apartment and he said, you know, there's people in this building who have become millionaires. And there's people in this building who are just like, great, I have a warm, safe place. I'm going to keep doing my hobby, which is knitting. And here we go. I go to my job, I get my, you know, or then I get my pension and I'm good, right? And so but that's a perfect illustration of housing as a foundation for people to do other things or simply to enjoy their life, right? And so we need to bring back some of those opportunities, either really low cost schemes for getting people into ownership if they want, or into things like co-ops where you don't own, but you have tenure. No one will ever throw you out.
Wow.
Agreed. I probably own a home of my own here. And you know, it makes me sad to think that I can't offer that kind of stability to pass down to my children if I can't even get it myself. So I'd like to see a world where we could make housing, you know, a human right and make it affordable for the next generation, because we got to do something. Moving on. What else do you think we should position?
Pardon? What
more questions? We have more questions for you.
Okay, go for it.
Let's see. Do you have anything more to say on housing, or should I go to the budget, or should we go to, you already talked about defunding the police, and I think that was pretty much going to be my question.
I'd like to talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, please do.
I read this great book called God, now my brain is John Sewell's book on policing in Canada. And he co-wrote it with a person whose name I can't remember. But ever since he was mayor, there's sort of this little group who have been activists around policing, right? And one of the things that it's a bit of a shocking book. So if you get a chance to read it, read it. But there's also hope in the book, in that it's like totally nerdy about stats and things like that, right? And so one of the things they said was that, so things like driving your car around endlessly all day long does not actually do very much. It is not useful. And also building databases by carding people is also not useful. It does not stop crime. Neither of those things have ever been shown to stop crime. So then I think, oh, okay, this book is really cool. It probably doesn't apply to my ward. Whatever, here we go, right? And then I start talking to people, and I think that there is other sort of opposition that is different, and people shouldn't poo-poo it. They should hold hands. So I'm knocking on doors in the northern part of my ward, which is like Lawrence Park, kind of pretty well-heeled sort of houses. And they're saying they're really upset. Like, they're really upset with the police. And I'm kind of like, okay, how come? And they say, well, because like they never come. We're afraid of where all these cars are being stolen. There's break-ins. And no, they are not blaming it on, low-income people. They're blaming it on the police. Like, they're not saying we should just give the police more money and then they'll do this. No, they're saying, what the hell is happening to the $1.2 billion we're giving the police right now? Why can't they do their jobs? Right? And so I think that there are some coalitions that can be built. The other thing in the book that is really kind of eye-opening, appalling, which I think we all know, is that the police bully city councilors who stand up to them, right? And they, like, even in Alberta, one of the members of the legislature, I don't know if you remember, like, the police were following around and trying to collect information, trying to collect dirt on her effectively. And this has been going on for a long time. I mean, have a chat. Whenever I hear anything about the police, I always go and see what Alec Mukherjee thinks about it, because he was the chair of the Police Services Board for a long time. And I think he probably wins the prize for being the person who most stood up to the police. So this is probably, again, too long of an answer, but I think there's a bunch that what the police have been doing, according to the book Policing in Canada, is they're essentially saying they give the city, like, their budget is like 6 lines. It's like nothing. You can't actually scrutinize it. You can't do anything. They just say approve it, or the city will fall into terrorism. Like, no, it won't. So
let me just jump in there for a second. So there's a candidate that we interviewed in Ward 11, and he's part of something called the Municipal Social Alliance, Socialist Alliance.
Okay.
And one of their big key planks is defunding the police by a minimum of 50%.
Yeah.
And even though I like the guy, I don't necessarily agree on the number. I think that defunding them by any amount, well, we can repurpose the money, and that's a good thing. It doesn't solve the issue, because the issue is the police are not responding, or the police are excessive, or fill in the blank. So
they're using the money to buy paramilitary equipment, which is like not part of their job.
Mm-hmm.
And it's where they're spending a lot of the money, and they're not answering the basic needs of citizens. But also, I think big companies, like, I know I've had like Primus defraud me, right? Mm-hmm. I sent them back a a modem. They said they never got it. There's no one to really turn to. And there's no one to turn to when people are overcharging, when big companies, like there's an uneven balance. And I do think that there's a bunch of stuff that is just as crime as that affects everyday people. And we have to, I wouldn't pick a number, but I would definitely say there's a bunch of things that I don't think they should be doing. And it costs money, and no, you don't get money for that. And maybe we give it to other people like mental health support teams.
So absolutely.
But,
and probably the first thing that I would suggest is the mounted unit. But the other point that I wanted to make is it, for me, it has to do with the language that exists inside the contracts of the Toronto Police. So I don't know if you're a big Rob Ford fan, and if you're not, I apologize. But when he was mayor, he and the city workers' contracts came up for renewal. There's a clause inside the contracts that he removed. It was the jobs for life contract, or job for life clause.
okay.
And I would bet my bottom dollar that a similar clause is in the Toronto Police Service contract. Now, if we remove that clause and replace it with something in the neighborhood of 3 strikes and you're out, so that the police union can't, what's the word I'm looking for? Can't save the officers from getting fired, because if the officers are committing 3 strikes and they're out, then they're fired.
You don't even get 3 strikes. Like that is definitely one of the reforms that John Sewell and his co-author are recommending, that you don't get paid leave while you try to prolong your court trial forever and ever and
Like
ever.
James, like James Fursillo.
Yeah, you don't get that. And so like, it's just so obviously unfair and one-sided and not serving anyone, that there's a whole list of things that we have to do that are very particular and very helpful. And I think we will, because I think we do in the end, most of us do want police. We just want them to be like fair and not to kill anybody. And we want value for our money. And, how do we get there?
Absolutely. Ebony, do you have anything to add?
No, I also would enjoy being able to call the police and hope that they actually come and help me. Show up and all, maybe not murder me. Yes.
Yes. No kidding. And you may need their protection or someone's protection, right? So
they have never helped. Every single time I have called them because I've had an unruly boyfriend, somehow I have been the one who has been detained because they've wanted to hear the white person's story first. It's interesting. I have a very biased opinion, I suppose, of the police, just because I'm Black. So like, I really don't have stories, period.
Yeah.
I personally don't even like that children's show Paw Patrol, because I feel like it just paints the police as far too friendly for children. And they make that Black female mayor look so flippin' incompetent. Like the chicken could do a better job running the town. So that's not positive promotion or like representation of a Black woman, period. But
I'm laughing, but I absolutely get it. I'm laughing at your description and the way you're describing it, but I get that these things, like a lot of people don't notice those sorts of, they're little kind of slurs, right?
Yeah, it's very backhanded, especially when you find Black people who are policing, and you're like, hey, I'm surprised, like I'm really happy to have someone of my skin color here to like represent, but they are just as bad as some of their white counterparts, or they will turn a blind eye to it because they need to do what they need to do to be able to keep their job. And that's another thing, like I can't even imagine the inherent racism inside their system, how much it takes to get representation on the force in the first place.
Yeah,
definitely not feeling like I'm equally represented, and I definitely don't feel like they work in the interest of my people, and not just being like low income people too. You might as well be Black you're poor. Honestly, being poor seems to be criminalized, and that's another problem. We don't need to criminalize being poor, and housing should be a human right and not something that you can lock somebody else like up for sleeping in a public park. That's another thing.
Yeah. No, Mark Saunders ran in this ward, in this riding in the last election. And so I met him several times. Like, he's a nice guy, right? But I don't think he made an incredible difference in terms of fairness in the way police, like just having like one guy who's black, who's the police chief, that doesn't seem to be the answer.
No, seems rather tokenized.
Mhm.
And then I feel like also when we talk about the kind of money that's been spent on, police task forces and et cetera, someone mentioned Tavis. I used to live over by Weston and Eglinton area, and Tavis
Mhm.
used to be, oh, hello, there's a little centipede in my bowl here. Very heavy-handed with the carding and with pulling you over, trying to get to know the community in this way. And it wasn't very helpful because from a child protection even like standpoint, once you vilify youth,
Yes.
once you label them as a criminal, once you put on them that burden of being criminalized, being pulled over, being searched, having your rights taken from you, once you leave them with that bad taste in their mouth, it never really goes away. The community will continue to vilify them, doors will be closed to them. They personally won't feel like they belong anywhere else than like the street corner, like they've been painted into that kind of life. And it seems to be, especially when you throw youth into juvenile systems for like gang related offenses, they actually end up joining more gangs in the jail or in the jail. And when they get back out, they end up put right in a gang because they can't get a job elsewhere. So it really ended up being very backwards in its efficacy. And I feel like the police force has yet to really redefine their approach. Like, okay, that didn't work. What can we do that's different and new? And that can be like, it's proven to be helpful. Like, where are we looking at this from like a psychological standpoint? I don't feel like they've really recreated their approach. So like, why should we continue to give them more money if they're not going to show us something different?
And I think that we have to be very, very careful where we are right now, because, the whole private jails thing is coming up from the States, where there's an incentive to incarcerate more and more people, right? Because you get money for it.
Yes.
And so we have to figure out, and I'm not saying I have answers at all. We have to figure out systems that don't incentivize stuff that is bad for society.
Agreed.
Well, this has been really, really great. Before we go, though, I'd love to get your opinion on, I want to talk about the pandemic for a couple minutes.
Okay.
I'd love to know your opinion on how you think the city handled the pandemic at the municipal level, of course. Whether or not you think we learned anything, and in your opinion, do you think we'd be ready for the next pandemic?
I'm still of the opinion that the pandemic is not over. Like, when you look at the hospitals and you look at the stats, there's 3 times as much COVID in Ontario right now as there is in Quebec, and where there's slightly less population than us, but we're the 2 biggest provinces, right? I feel like the city did a better job than the province. And where am I? What do you need to know about me? I'm quadruple vaxxed, right? I fell into this little tiny sweet spot when they're giving out. I've had one of everything, just cover all bases, right? AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Moderna, just, keep going. I haven't had the new one yet, but, I wanted, so I was able to kind of get through that fairly easily. I fell into an age crack where they stopped giving AstraZeneca to older people. And so then I ended up being the oldest age group who could get it. So I was one of the first who managed to get it. So I think they dealt with it fairly well. There was some weird stuff like, not having the or I shouldn't say weird. There was bad stuff. I live in a neighborhood that is fairly well off. So our Shoppers Drug Mart was giving it out, but the Shoppers Drug Mart all over the city, it wasn't evenly spread out, right? So that's a bad thing. I think that they did pull their socks up, it seemed to me, and with mobile clinics and stuff like that. So that's a good thing. I don't like, it was all the province. Like I have a small business, and my office is in the Junction, and all the small businesses around me were dying, right? Because like I don't need walk by traffic. I was just there to accept samples and reboot the servers periodically, right? All my staff are working from home. But the retail around me just sort of sunk as Costco was open. But that's kind of like the province who did that. The municipality was really about giving out vaccines, and I do think they made mistakes at the beginning, and then they got better. There's my answer.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for agreeing to this interview. I know originally it was supposed to be a debate, but I had a lot of fun, and
Me too.
I'm excited. I love municipal politics. I love elections specifically. Election night for me is great. Unfortunately, this time I'm going to have to do it remotely because I'm going to be out of the country. But usually I'm in front of the TV. I'm watching all the ward races, not just the mayoral race. Not just the big seat. Everywhere too, not just Toronto. But I want to wish you so much luck on your campaign trail, and thank you so much for coming out. Ebony and I are always down to talk to anybody. And by the way,
any excuse to geek out.
Exactly. I think it takes so much guts to just even put your name on the ballot. Because that's a commitment, and municipally, provincially it's like 3 weeks, but municipally it's like what, 5-6 months.
It was the other way around for me. I started in October before June 2nd provincially, raising money, and this time we just said, okay, well, we've got the team, let's try it again. And we had to try to raise money from zero, right? So we're really doing like it. We're going to be, I think we're going to come in at $5,000, and we have about 4,500 right now, and we're really figuring out how to do it. And so yeah, that's been my experience of the two different things. I could tell you campaign stories, but I won't.
Well, we'd love, after the election, we'd love to have you on, talk about business, talk about your election experience, whatever you like. We're always, when we, because once the election happens and I go away, we're going to be taking about a month off from the podcast, and then recalibrate. And when we come back, we're still going to stick with our interviews every other week or whatever it's going to be. We're going to do interviews, but we're also going to be dipping our toe into the true crime pond.
Okay.
With certain parameters. We're gonna stick to, for now, Ontario only, and they have to be unsolved because we're going to try to solve them.
Okay, I haven't committed any murders.
And also, because we were originally a history podcast, every now and again we're going to be doing history. Starting, we're going to start with the War of 1812. It's a 3-part series, just to stay true to our roots. But I mean, there's so many things happening, and
you know what I'd really like to talk about is climate action. Yes. Because I believe that we can do this, and we're being told we can't, or people just don't, and I don't want to start a conspiracy theory, okay? I'm really sorry. But I can see, particularly in the building, how we can easily reduce 50% emissions in 8 years and stabilize the climate where it is today, which is not fantastic, by the way. Have you checked out Pakistan recently? So, or like Lytton, British Columbia, or where my family is in Manitoba, the crops failed for 2 years. Like, we're so disconnected from the fact of what we eat, right? And anyway, so I can talk about that forever, so I'll stop. But if you want me to talk about, I think that there is a definite plan for doing it. We can afford it. We have the technology. We don't have the courage. That's our issue.
I think that's a fair point. I mean, food prices are out of control, and food sustainability is not something that is talked about or like even taught in school. There is a large between like city folk and you know, people who understand the value of growing your own food, storing it, all sorts. I mean, it's actually really scary.
Yeah.
Well, here's what we'll do. You know, let's wait till after the election, because you may be way too busy. But after the election, Ebony will reach out to you, and if we can settle on a date, I'd love to have you back on.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that could be a whole like little mini series. Where do we find you anyway? Let the public know.
Yeah, your website, everything.
Oh, my website is voteshenasharp.ca.
Awesome.
Generic, so that I can, you know, keep running and keep bugging the incumbents about climate action and housing.
That's great. And, you know, like I said, this has been great. And thank you so much on behalf of Ebony and myself. Thank you. And we wish you all the luck in your on your campaign trail.
Thank you. Thank you.